Hallo und herzlich willkommen, liebe HSG-Alumni, zur heutigen Web3 Webinar-Serie. Das Thema heute...
English?
Oh, English, yeah, sorry. Yes, warm welcome, dear HSG alumni colleagues, to today's webinar. It's part of our Web3 series that we are currently holding till summer. As you have possibly noticed, we have different formats, webinars, events, all around topics about metaverse, artificial intelligence, NFT, and blockchain. And today we're talking about a new hype theme about ChatGPT. And today I'm very happy that we have two special guests with me, Marcus and Sina, and they will share their experiences about how to create business value with ChatGPT. Marcus, Sina, warm welcome to today's session, and the floor is yours.
Okay, great. Maybe a little introduction, as we have maybe some international guys in there. Marcus Schögel, Institute of Marketing and Customer Insight, alum of the year of 1997, I think. So an old guy and very great hair guy. Working at the Institute since then as a professor now here in St.Gallen, responsible for the Master Marketing Management and looking always into technologies and marketing, how we manage that properly. Looking forward in doing this session with Sina together.
Thank you, and also a warm welcome from myself. I'm also a HSG alumni. I did my PhD here in financial modeling, so I have some background also in how artificial intelligence works from a statistical point of view. Worked many years for Credit Suisse, and then 2 years ago, so just in time, I moved to a startup called Unique, and we're working now with ChatGPT or the GPT-based function to develop client value, and I want to show you use cases today, also how for enterprise use cases, we already develop use cases, and I'm happy to be here. So, Marcus.
Okay, great. So the objective is to give you an insight on that whole topic of ChatGPT, how you can really use it for business value. And I'm going to take over a little bit of the more theoretical perspective on it, give you a little bit of a framework that you might be using then as well for your practical challenges when we talk about ChatGPT. I'm going to take about 15 minutes, and then Sina is going to join in, and she's going to take over and spend a little bit more time then on this whole topic. What are the use cases that we already see for ChatGPT? But before we start, maybe just one remark that for me is very important. Maybe you've seen that slide on LinkedIn. I'm not seeing myself as an expert in AI that is now the master guru of it. I'm looking at the topic merely from the perspective really of the management of marketing interactions with customers. And you will see a lot of examples that are not closely related right now to just ChatGPT, but to digital interactions, to robots that are AI-generated moves, algorithms using to interact with customers. And the basic idea behind it is that we're going to look at 3 points within the next 15 minutes. The first one is AI. What do we know? What is it? A little bit of definitions, a little bit of insight. What is the real mechanics behind it? A little bit of insight. What are the challenges in there? Then going into something that we call intelligence and automation. And this is what it brings and what are the challenges that we're going to take over. A lot of things you might be having already at hand in mind, and hopefully I can support your ideas or your thinking a little bit, maybe challenging it a little bit with that topic of large language models, what it is, to give you a little bit of idea what we're really looking at when we're just focusing down on the ChatGPT part. And then I'm going to give over to Sina, and she's going to take over then for the practical part. So what we know about AI, university, what does it mean? Definitions. I need to do that. So one of the first definitions that I would like to show you is how AI is defined within the academic scene from different perspectives. You always come down to the same idea. We want to get as intelligent as human beings are. And this means we're using technology to mimic in certain cases how intelligent people or intelligence with human beings is working. And this mimicking is, I think, one thing that you need to be aware of, that this is not the real case for most of the applications that we're seeing nowadays. Just give you the background on this. This is what I'm feeling most when I'm talking to executives and marketeers and salespeople about AI. They either have the understanding that it's just a positive guy like C-3PO from Star Wars, and the others are relating it more to the Golem or the Maria out of Metropolis. So the negative side of the bad people, of the machines, going down to Frankenstein even, and the golem that you saw in early silent movies. But this idea is very strong in Europe, that this is the bad side of AI. When you take out that mimicking, we come down to a definition that I like much more. We call it intelligent automation. It's pretty much the same, but it defines already what the challenge will be. It's the interaction between automated machines that help us to do stuff more effectively, more within the contact to our customers and to our employees. And already that idea, I think, summarizes very well what we are looking at when we talk about intelligent automation, or call it AI, but take a little bit of that idea that we're getting faster, cheaper, easier, more convenient for customers. That's, for me, one of the major points that we need to address in the next years. And when you look at all the technologies that are in there, a lot is about data volumes and computation of a large set of data that you're using to bring in knowledge. So this means the more data we can store, the more the machine can calculate and can operate by itself on this data that we're having there. So one of the basic models that we have in AI is always this unsupervised learning idea. And I just pulled out one example to show you a little bit what that means. Unsupervised learning means that you've got data from different sources that you give into a machine, and on the basis of this data, the machine, the algorithm, learns in a certain way to distract relevant information from data that we don't describe to them. So they're learning by themselves to interpret if this is an apple, a banana, or an orange. And learning out of that data and building out of the data that we're giving them. We're building algorithms, we're building a model that we then can use with external data in the biggest form of exploitation of the whole idea to get a result that means, oh, I can differentiate between apples, oranges, and bananas by myself and use this then as an intelligent idea to structure, differentiate, combine elements of information to give better advice, to make better decisions on the basis of the data that we're giving to that machine, to that algorithm, to that envelope, how we call it in some cases. So basically what we're looking at is that we're trying to automate certain operations that are either challenging, they are hard, they are too much, they are unstructured, or they're too structured. And we want to substitute this by using a machine that helps us then to do other things, to be more creative. And this is one point that I want to get down to, that from my point of view is very important. There's a model that that was in the Journal of Service Research that does something that I think is very important when we talk about this AI, intelligent automation stuff. When you look at the way that we work and what kind of tasks and jobs do we have, then we've got mechanical jobs, we've got analytical jobs, we've got intuitive jobs, and we've got empathetic jobs, which is going all the way down to more, the human being. And the substitution that you see here that is predicted by these two authors, that I think they did a great job on that. They're saying a lot of mechanical stuff that we've been doing right now, we can substitute with machines. We can make them as intelligent to do the whole work. So we can move out as human beings of that hardcore mechanical work. The same happens already to analytical jobs. Data analytics are done by machines and algorithms much faster and much better than we would do it by ourselves. Think of medicine when you're scanning for lung cancer and all that stuff. You can be much more faster with an algorithm that helps you to analyze that body, analyze on uncommonalities, and you find much faster the disease within the person. The more we move into the right, the more you come to borders of substitution. This means the more we're getting into this intuitive part, where it's about knowledge, about expertise, about interactions, about perceptions, the more we go to the right side, and even to the empathic part that comes very much into play in a lot of businesses, especially in sales situations. Sina will show you that later on. The more we can't substitute, but we need to collaborate. And when you think about this idea of that collaboration between a machine and a human being, I think this is one of the major points that we need to make when we talk about generative AI. The three key insights that we had in several projects that we did with companies in the last 2 years, 2 to 3 years, is we will be able that we move out of work that is hard and mechanical and not really fun and really more boring. The second thing that happens is that we need to learn to collaborate with the machine. This means we need to talk to them. We need to have a conversation with them. This might be that we need to code, or we need to prompt a question that is proper, or we need to give them directions how to paint a picture. And this is what we need to learn. And the third thing is, and this is what I like most about it, is we get more free space to get more empathetic and more intuitive. And we need to build those skills much more up, and we need to elaborate much more on them, because this is where the music plays for us as human beings when we're talking to work with machines. So you see, there's a lot of upside, and I know there's a lot of downside, and we're going to discuss this later on, I think. But one thing that I learned out of technology when you use it in your interaction with the customer is always, if you give a fool a fast tool, the only thing is you get a faster fool. And let me give you a brief example that happened to me in Singapore. They're using robots in restaurants right now because they don't get the service personnel anymore. And the robots are just substituting parts of the defined processes that were there before the robots were introduced. So they should take you to a table, they should give you the menu, they should deliver the food. And I had an experience I would never forget, because the robot just took me to the next service person that then showed me the space, because the robot was just broken, he couldn't do it. The second thing was the robot that should bring me my food, my order, my nice little ramen pot. 3 times he circled around me and I said, hey, I'm here. He didn't recognize. So the service person came in again and she didn't apologize. He said, you switched tables. I said, no, I didn't. Yes, you did. He didn't find it. Was crazy. So I complained on WhatsApp, and you see on the right side what the answer was. In the automated answer, we're striving for better quality, not reacting to anything that happened to me. You know, this is the worst thing that could happen. You're not making it better, you're making it worse. And when you're doing it that worse, do you think I'm going to go back to that restaurant? Definitely not. So maybe what helps, and we're going to use this as an overarching topic for Sina. Sina is going to elaborate a little bit more on that. But what is happening is, and maybe this helps you to see this as a little framing for your practical challenges as well. When you look at it, then you can see that from the customers, we've got 2 ways now they can interact with the company. The one is the frontline employee that is still there in many cases. And on the other hand, they can interact with the frontline automation, with a robot, with a software, what have you, that is building the digital interaction part in that whole conversation. Now, both are able to talk to customers. To do this properly, they need to interact with each other. So in this triangle, we've got a lot of challenges, because consumers have different motives, employees have different motives, and the machines are running on different algorithms. So if we're not learning to build an idea on how this collaboration should work, we're really running into the biggest problem, because it will never add in value. The precondition for the whole stuff is that you have automated data. And this is something that we'll be tackling too much, but all the things that we're discussing about needs to have structured or unstructured data that is accessible for the frontline automation from a backend that brings all the data ideas and all the information that we need to the table. If it's not automated, don't think about AI. If it is not structured, don't think about AI. If it is not in a data lake or something, don't think about AI. It's not coming to you by a snap of a finger. You need to have a high level of digitization already in place, or using tools that help you to use this digitization. And this is exactly what's happening with the large language models. And large language models, they, on the other hand, come around in an idea that we call generative AI. AI is generating content. It's not only talking to us and giving us an answer, it's able of generating content like pictures, like videos. You've seen all the different examples. For me, it's very important that you keep in mind, we're going to talk about ChatGPT, because it's one of the, so to say, the master killer apps that we see right now. But be aware that you've got different apps that might be beneath the surface right now, that might be suitable for certain different challenges, like you want to paint a picture or you want to do a video. Then other apps might be applicable as well, using the same idea of a large language model. What a large language model does is that it tries to understand meaning out of words. So they are not comparing apples, bananas, and oranges, but they're comparing logical or suitable sentences made up out of different words. And what they are calculating is, with a sentence, what would be the next probable word that you can put into a sentence to make meaning out of that sentence regarding to a certain question. You see, a little bit complicated, but when you look at it, we've got the training data, then we've got the large language model, which pretty much works like that deep learning tool that I showed you already, this unsupervised learning. But what we're doing right now, we're giving them a question, we're giving them a prompt, but I'm always asking, and I asked, and you see this on the left side, the text is from ChatGPT, what are you? And ChatGPT gives me an answer. So I'm asking ChatGPT something, and ChatGPT uses the data that they have, the training data, to give me an answer what the data says what ChatGPT should be. So it's nothing else than building out of words and even sometimes sentences, depends a little bit on the programming and the coding. Out of this data that this machine knows, we build with the language model, we build information that is relevant for us. Maybe one thing more. This is not about logic. This is about probability. It's very important. You know, ChatGPT is not smarter than us. It's dumber than us, so to say, but it reacts to questions and answers on behalf what his knowledge is. That is the training data. Okay. So, yeah, and it hits in our face. In December, ChatGPT had within 5 days 1 million users. When you look at how the diffusion of and adaptation of this different technologies that you see on that slide, this is what's happening. It's fast. It's getting to us earlier than we could think. And this is why we need to discuss this topic and try to understand where we can build the business value. But this is now the other side of the coin, and I will hand over to Sina to give us more input on the idea how you can really use it in real life cases within the practical field.
So thank you, Marcus. And I just read up that in March, like this March, 1 billion user was surpassed. So I think you see the popularity of the tool and how it's evolving also for different use cases. And I'm happy to walk you now through to some of the use cases. So as mentioned already, I'm working for a startup called Unique. So we are based in Zurich, but also already in Germany and the UK. And we are building software. So we are a SaaS company, software as a service. And we use GPT and ChatGPT to generate summaries out of client conversations. And I will show you a couple of use cases today. And as Marcus mentioned before, he showed this little simple framework that he said. And what we are mainly doing is that we're working at the interface of the customer and the frontline employee. So our working hypothesis is there is still a frontline employee or a relationship manager or an advisor, but we kind of supercharge the frontline employee with more information, with better information, more insights about the client so that they can better serve the customer. And as Marcus already also mentioned, we try to take out repetitive tasks like documentation, looking up, I don't know, research reports, for example, if you work for a bank. All this should be at hand when you talk to your client. Before we go into the unique use cases, I just kind of want to give some highlights on the emerging use cases that we see with ChatGPT. And I'm not sure how much you're familiar, but I think one of the use cases that you can use it for is answer questions. For example, I don't know, explain me quantum computing in simple terms, and then you will get an answer. And what I think is also nice, it's a chat function. So you can ask back and say, I don't understand number 3, explain in more detail. Or you explain too complicated, I'm a 5-year-old now, explain it in more simple terms or simpler terms. So I think kind of like Google, I would say, but you get better answers. What you can also use it for, I'm using it regularly for that, is to rewrite text or blog posts. You can just say, write me a LinkedIn post on the future of AI, and you get a perfect answer, especially in English. The tool works really well, I feel. Also great for idea generation. I don't know if you people already used it for that, but if you are looking for a present, you could, for example, ask, do you have creative ideas for a present for a 10-year-old, for example? Or also what we use it for in our company is to generate new product ideas, product features. You have to describe your product and then say, what kind of features as a user would you like to have? And then you usually get good outputs. Also, you can develop apps and homepages, and I show you an example in a second. But this is also for people who cannot code. You can just kind of write a prompt, develop me a homepage, write me the code for it, and then there you go. Also, I think very popular with students is the homework and assignment support, I call it. I mean, I'm not calling it a replacement, but I think it's a big help, especially when you don't need like current data, but looking back, I don't know, for history class or something. I think also it's a valuable support, also how to structure your answer. Also a nice use case I recently found, it can, or like ChatGPT can act as a psychologist. So if you had a bad day, you can kind of describe, I had a bad day, this and this happened, what should I do? And then ChatGPT gives answers. And you can, you can chat and say like, well, but I mean, I'm especially feeling like this, can you help me? What should I do? And, it recommends things to you. Also in software engineering, we feel like you can get code corrected. And here we have to put a disclaimer, which I'm always saying is don't put sensitive or company specific data, also IP code in ChatGPT. But if it's a general code, I don't know how to build up a database, you can get this code also corrected. Also, if you have a code in a programming language like R, you can get it translated into another code if you need to move around from different program languages. What's that? The last one? I can't read it. Sorry.
Personalized.
Oh yeah, personalized emails. I show you in a second. That's also very popular. I mean, we're all tired of writing emails, right? And then it's all kind of the same text body. And ChatGPT can help to personalize these emails, and you can also customize chatbots. That's also a common use case. So this is more, I would say, in the private area that we can use ChatGPT. I think that was also a nice experiment. So the guy Jackson Greathouse, he asked ChatGPT to build up a business based on $100 as fast as possible to make as much money as possible. That was kind of his setup. And he also said he, as a human, would do everything that the chat would suggest to him. And this was on Twitter, and I followed it for a while. And I think he got a valuation of 25,000 after a couple of days. He built a company on ecological friendly products. I can't remember, something green it was called, but he used ChatGPT for almost everything. To build up the homepage, he generated the code. To generate pictures, he used DALL-E, also a picture software by OpenAI. To generate prototypes, he also used a picture software, and kind of everything with ChatGPT. I think important here is it was not one prompt, but it was several different steps, and using also the chat function to iterate on ideas. But I think it's an interesting use case, and maybe one of you is now inspired to do something similar. Let me know. Also, interesting use case for salespeople, and some of you might work in sales, is that you can train your negotiation skills also with ChatGPT. That you can describe a scenario and kind of say, now I'm at this point, I want to reach a target price of $40,000. What's the negotiation strategy? What should I say? And I think this is very interesting. And I told our salespeople to use it so that you can iterate on ideas. And then I wouldn't say take it one by one in your calls, but as ideas how to move forward. So kind of these are more general use cases I see at the moment. And what I want to show you now is the use cases that we see at Unique. So what our aim or our guiding vision at Unique is that we want to cut out client advisor time that they spend on admin work. Let's say a lot of people, especially in the banking and insurance industry, they need to do a lot of documentation. Also for compliance purposes, they need to fill up the CRM. And the founder of our company, he had this vision. Why do we need to fill out a CRM? This is stupid. A machine can do this. It's empty boxes. Why cannot a machine do it? We need the data in a structured form, but it can, like AI can do this. We don't need a human for that. And if we talk, for example, to bank advisor, they spend 70% on their time on admin work. So even if we reduce it by like 5 to 10%, already we free up time for other tasks. And our ambition is to free up the whole 50% to work on these manual tasks. And as Marcus said, also free up time for more the intuitive, empathetic work, like, build trust with the client, better hear on the needs of the client, ask better questions, give better feedback. I think that's the aim that we're working towards. And how we do is we support with the manual documentation. which means Unique is kind of a chatbot that comes into an online meeting like the Zoom meeting, but we also have an app for offline meetings. And during the meeting, you can kind of record, or not kind of, you record the meeting, and out of this meeting, you get a transcript then, which is kind of the written version of the conversation. So it would be basically Marcus said, Sina said, and then you have the whole conversation. If you have now an hour-long meeting, I mean, you don't want to read through the whole script, but you want a summary, or you want a follow-up email. I want to write, hey, Marcus, thanks for the nice talk. I noted these follow-ups for you. And this is where Unique can support. Also, we have a live meeting summary. So also in the meeting itself, you could get a summary right away. And also, I think the last point is also important. You can highlight key moments. So if, for example, in a sales conversation, we speak about the price or what competitors offer, this would be a key moment that also my colleagues should know about. I can just tag this, or the AI can tag it to say, like, this is something we need to pay attention to. What Unique also does is, especially after the meeting, we can have customized automatic summaries based on the GPT technology. And here we have to say we work closely with Microsoft Azure here in Switzerland. And I don't know if Primo, who's the cloud lead of Microsoft Switzerland, is in the call, but we have a very close partnership with Microsoft here, and we use the GPT functionality via Microsoft. And the big advantage is that Microsoft ensures enterprise security standards to us. And I think that's important if we think about enterprise use cases or corporate use cases, that on the security and data protection side, we make sure no client data is kind of leaked to OpenAI. And so my recommendation would also be to work with Microsoft, who is currently offering the API, so the application programming interface for OpenAI, who is hosting ChatGPT. Also, what Unique does, that's the second point on the right side, is we have a free text prompting available. So if I want to get very specific insights from the meeting, I could also, for example, ask how many questions did the client ask, and was all the questions answered? I mean, me as a leader, I would be interested if all my salespeople, you know, if they have answers to the questions that clients are asking. So I could have also very customized prompts here. So let's get into the use cases. So here you see during the meeting, this is kind of how it would look like in a Teams meeting. Unique pops up on the right-hand side. It's a sidebar, and you can turn on the recording or turn off. Here we have some consent topics, so people who are in the call need to consent. We all know from COVID times that when you join a call which is recorded, you have to give consent. Also, what you see here in like the green and gray little bubbles is like a structured meeting agenda. So if I have a call, in this case, it's a KYC meeting, it's a know your client meeting for a bank. It follows a very structured approach. And this guideline helps the client advisor to guide through and not to forget anything, right? Usually you're on the phone and you're like, oh, I should have asked about the address change and I forgot about it. Then you need to call the client again. Client is not there, you have to call again, and you lose a lot of efficiency. So with this guided agenda, we make sure we have certain standards. Our client advisors talk to clients and also don't forget about things. So let me show you also what's possible during the meeting. And I personally think it's very cool what's already available is that the first example is that we can have an instant client contact summary, which means like already during the call, ChatGPT in the background starts summarizing the call. And this is an example from a large health insurance here in Switzerland. And we all know you call and you say, hey, I'm at the dentist, I need a new teeth. Do you pay for that? And then you should make a CRM entry right after the call, not in the evening, but right after the call. And with this tool now, you can have an instant summary. So this is a customized version now for this insurance clients. And you can send it. You see this sent to CRM. You can send it right away to your CRM after the meeting. And it really saves the people a lot of time that are on the phone. And, you know, these people in the hotlines, they're on the phone all day. So it's really, it frees up their time with the summary. One important thing to mention here is that with Unique, as I said, we have the human in the middle. So human is always in the loop and needs to check the summary. I mean, I would say 90 to 95% the summary is fairly correct, but in some cases, the advisor also needs to change some things and before you send them to the CRM. So this is a fully editable summary, so you can adjust in case something was not recognized correctly. The second use case, which is also very cool, we developed with a Swiss bank together, is that in a banking context, the algorithm or the AI detects if you want to sell or buy a stock, so a stock transaction. So if I say now I want to buy 3 Apple shares, the algorithm detects, oh, there is a transaction coming up, and then we have this little pop-up coming up, and noting all the important points that we need for a stock transaction. So for example, which stock is it about, which ISIN, so that's the number of the stock. What's the quantity? How many do you want to buy? I want to buy 3. Do you want to buy it today with a limit order, or is it like a market order that you want to order? Also, you can see here, you can send it to Avalok afterwards, which means we are in, so the relationship manager is in a call with the client, the transaction is recognized automatically, and then right afterwards, the client advisor can send it to their trading system and how do you say, to execute the trade. That's a very cool use case. We experiment with one Swiss bank, as I mentioned, and now we're working on a global rollout. So Singapore would kind of be the next to use this. And the feedback from the client is that they save about 20%. Each relationship manager saves about 20% with this, just with this use case. The reason for that is it's a bank serving merely older clients who are calling a lot to buy and sell their stocks. So myself, I mean, I do everything online, but older people in these banks, I'm not sure, Marcus, how you do it, but they still call, I mean, older.
Thanks a lot.
That was not meant like that.
That's okay.
And then let me show you the use cases after the meeting. So what we do after the meeting is that we summarize the call. So here, for example, the first use case is, what are the most important questions that have been asked by the client? So you get a summary here. The summary is, how can I invest in US technology companies, for example? The second example is you get an extraction of to-dos. So you need to follow up with the information on the World Growth Fund by the end of the week. So you see the GPT function is very specific. So it says the to-do and also the timing, and usually it also says who has to do it. Yeah, here it says to-dos for John. So it's very specific. It's not generic, but you really can. It's really helpful. Also, the third point is interesting to prepare for the next client meeting. You can also ask the chat, what's the top priority agenda items for the next meeting? How should I prepare? So here, just a little bit more structured, you see what you can do. And this is with the ChatGPT function that's built in the unique product. You can, as I said, you can have summaries by topics. You can also have an overview of all the transactions and the advice that was given. That's especially important in the banking context, that from a compliance perspective, it's noted kind of which shares have been recommended, which did the client buy, and so on. Also for liability reasons, this needs to be documented. Also, as we mentioned, the to-do extraction is very helpful also for relationship managers, because when they have the next call or the client is on the call, they can just kind of open the window and they know what they have to pay attention to. Number 4 is also very interesting, that you can get additional client insights, kind of for the next meeting. What were the most important aspects? Which products should I suggest? What are, for example, the top 3 asset classes that the customer showed interest in? And the last point is automatic follow-up emails. That's a very standard case and works really well. So these were kind of the use cases, and I now want to show you some client reference. So we also kind of see that it's used in real life cases. So here you see Pictet, which is a Geneva-based private bank here in Switzerland. I would say a very secretive client, usually not very open to innovation, but we co-innovate with them on the GPT-based reports. So after a client conversation, they get automatic reports, but customized to their standards. So they usually have certain categories they want to look at, and Pictet gives the categories to us and we customize it for them. Also, I want to show you some more use cases that Unique has already implemented. So as I mentioned, the automatic meeting documentation is, for example, with Suica, that's the health insurance, and also the Liechtensteinische Bank is working with us and it saves about 20% of the time, which I already mentioned, for the client advisor. And I mean, it's only for one advisor. You can do the math. If you have 1,000 client advisor, either you have time for more clients, more tasks, or you can reduce your workforce. I think that's the option then that management has here. Also, the next example is the meeting follow-up, which we showed, like the instant summary after meeting. We work together, for example, with PostFinance for the financial services client to do the summary. Then also for training and client advisory purposes, for example, with Allianz, we are working to onboard new clients or new, not clients, new relationship managers. So they use the tool to get into the topic, to train their sales skills and so on. And the last one is the live coaching of sales personnel. As mentioned to Marcus already, we work with Swisscom, and so the time for onboarding is reduced here. Are we in time, or we have to?
Yeah, maybe 1-2 minutes,
yeah,
and then
okay,
we
good.
get to the questions.
Okay, I hope you get a glimpse on kind of the use cases that also in a corporate setup you could use. And before we leave you off for lunch, I want to give you some hints. I've been working with ChatGPT and large language models for a while. So just I think that's important in a slide for the future. If you want to work with ChatGPT, I think be specific. So the more context that you give, the better the answers you are. So if you say, for example, I'm a 5-year-old child, I'm living in Germany, and so on, you give a little bit more context than just saying, my question is, what books should I read? But if you give some background on who you are or who you want to be, you get more specific answers. Also for the corporate context, the more context you give, if you said, I'm a relationship manager for private banking in Switzerland, you get more specific answers. The next and very important, and as you've seen, I'm the data protection officer, so I cannot stress this enough. Don't paste sensitive data or company IP data into ChatGPT. Be very mindful about this. I'm saying this as the whole contractual structure of ChatGPT and OpenAI is not fairly clear. So the data processing agreements, privacy statements, I would say it's not up to corporate standards yet. So be careful here. Maybe in the future we'll see improvements, but I would be careful. Also, don't use harmful or inappropriate prompts. OpenAI might block you, so be careful also what you ask for. Also important, I think many people miss out on the chat function. So you can use the chat to iterate ideas and to kind of talk to ChatGPT to say, like, give me shorter answer, write me in bullets, use easy language. I think you can iterate as long until you're happy with the answer. And also, if you, for example, iterate on a project plan, you can iterate many times until you have the final version. And the last one is check the output for factual accuracy, which means ChatGPT has hallucination in the model, which means sometimes it makes up content because of statistical reasons, but it doesn't make sense. It sounds very plausible and very convincing, I have to say, but please check also on like the sources and on the answers, especially if you do homework or assignments. Then in general, what I could advise is if you want to work with ChatGPT in an enterprise setup, I would work with an API, and I can highly recommend Microsoft here, as you have a secure access to ChatGPT rather than work with the API of OpenAI in the US directly. Also important to know, ChatGPT is trained only until 2021. So if you have a question around the current context, or I don't know, the soccer championship last year, ChatGPT might not help you, but there are other tools out there that you can use. And I read today that OpenAI is working on an internet connection, so soon this also will be available. And then the last point is that ChatGPT is bad at computation and logic. You know, the simplest math task it cannot do, but there are also new emerging large language models like Wolfram Alpha that you can use for this task. The summary and kind of final thought is, I mean, we're all happy, I would say, about ChatGPT and all the generative AI that's coming up, but all still we have a brain that we can use. And I think to make the distinction when you can use ChatGPT and when you can use your brain is very important. So keep this in mind. For some tasks, it's helpful. For others, we as humans have better answers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I would maybe ask you to stop presenting the slides for a moment, so we see you in a bigger picture, and there are plenty of questions that have been asked in the chat, and I would ask you to answer them as short as possible so that we can cover as many questions as possible. So the first one is from Urs. What is your experience that software bots or robots too much automate existing processes rather than designing a new way of solving a problem in the sense of innovation?
Marcus, that's
Thanks. I think what is very important is, and Sina pointed that out very grateful and very perfect. ChatGPT, for instance, is not a tool to be innovative. It can only relate to things that are in the data that they have in the existing data lake. So it will be always a recombination of things that we already have. So what I'm seeing coming up that we will get, and this is sort of a saying that comes up here in Germany, more in Switzerland especially, is that, yeah, we've got a new intern, it's ChatGPT. So he takes over a lot of functions that normally gathering data, writing down pros and cons, but bringing it to a real level of innovation, I'm very doubtful that we have this at this point in time. The big discussion that we have is how far these machines can get in getting really creative from the point of view of art, of technological innovation, from creativity and all that stuff. And I believe that a lot of things that we can do that are substituted by stuff that we can do easier because we know what kind of data we can use, they will make it more easier, those machines. But being really innovative, thinking out of the box, I don't see this in the next years. That might be coming up somewhere on the other side of the chessboard, how they call it. But right now I'm seeing them more in substituting labor and activities that are repetitive, that are given on a large basis of information that you can summarize. But always keep in mind, it's a language model. It's not smart by itself. It can only be as smart as the data that it has. So for me, the innovation part comes later, but it can support you. It takes away all the hassle of finding things that are already there. So you can really focus on where the innovation part will be. And this is where you need your empathy, your intuition. And this is exactly what I think that, that will free us, those chatbots or those bots will free us from all those hassles that we have.
And there's a question about security from Holger. How do you protect client data when you input them into ChatGPT? Maybe that's one for you, Sina.
Yeah, so I think that's one of the key questions we're currently asking, and especially when working with banks. I mean, the security standards are very high, and I don't want to promote unique here, but what we experiment currently is that we take out personal data or private data before sending something to GPT. So kind of take it out, anonymize it, send it to GPT, use the GPT function, and when it comes back, we plug in again names, for example, or email addresses to protect the security, especially of individuals.
Thank you. Then a question from Yvonne. How do you rate the speed of adoption and penetration of GPT-4 in various processes in very large companies? Will they risk to miss the boat because they spend too long dealing with risk, security, and compliance issues before they are really finally ready to train the capable stuff and get them working with GPT-4?
Thanks for the question. That's a good question. And I think we're seeing different types of companies. So most companies, I would say, they are in an experimental setup. So they have like innovation labs where they try with a certain group and also with a limited group of clients, for example, or branches. They try out different use cases to show the business value first. For example, of a summary, really we have KPIs to measure then if it really adds value. But it's usually in a POC setup, so a proof of concept setup before they do the whole rollout. And then if you do a whole rollout and integration of ChatGPT into like a software landscape, it takes time, it takes data protection, IT security. So I would say it would take half a year until something like that is implemented.
Then Christian asked us, is saying that we've been talking about chatbots for decades. What led to the major leap forward with ChatGPT compared to other conventional and rudimentary chatbots?
It's the interface. It's the interface and the data that you can access. Former chatbots were built on the internal data of a company and had a very different kind of data lakes accessible. So this is why those chats were sometimes not really informative, so to say. And due to the access that ChatGPT offers and the ease of use that you have with the whole model, I think this is the breakthrough that we are seeing. A lot of AI experts are saying all the functions that are in ChatGPT, in the large language model, they've been there before, but the ease of use, the convenience, and the access to the data model and the data set is, I think, the one thing that really brought the breakthrough.
I would also add it's more UX, UI, so a design, how AI is designed or how the user journey is designed revolution than AI, let's say a model revolution in the background.
There's another question for you, Sina, from Holger. Maybe you can answer this very short or briefly. What is your added value as a company? Because the client could do all of those things by themselves.
You mean with, like, for example, Teams Premium offers this already, but what we offer is like a customization of the process. And we see, I can only talk for like Swiss financial institutions, but they need a high level of customization, also in terms of compliance, what they need to note or not note. So that's the added value, but it's a fair point. AI developments are very fast at the moment. And as Marcus showed, new companies are popping up almost daily, and I wouldn't say it's a struggle, but it's a challenge we are facing. Huh?
This may be a challenge that not just you are facing, but also political players. How are they going to keep up with the speed of progress that we're seeing now? Is it smart to freeze AI models and then focus on political ethical frameworks first? What if there's no global agreement on that question?
I think my point of view is that probably some of you have read that Italy banned ChatGPT. It was recently released after the latest OpenAI update that they provided, and they said they're not saving anymore the prompts and the outputs. So that helped Italy to release the ban. But I think also the Swiss officials, they released a note that they are far away from banning ChatGPT. They rather want to educate and put the right security measures in place, whatever that means. It was a very short note, but saying, you know, we are open to technology, but we need to find the right regulation.
I would add only one thing, and I think this is, and there's this joke about Italy banning ChatGPT because somebody was asking, could you put ananas on the pizza? Pineapple on the pizza, and ChatGPT said, of course you can. So from an Italian point of view, I can see the ban. No, just joking. What is really important is you see this, for instance, with the German discussion that they're having about AI right now, where they're saying you need to be transparent, you need to be fully documented and all that stuff. I see something different that the German Ethical Council put forward, and I think this is an important point. When you use new technologies, what always happens is when you substitute labor from human beings, you give them freedom to maneuver. You give them what we call in German Handlungsspielraum. You give them the ability to do new stuff. You don't substitute them, but you can help them to do other things. And when we can free labor from daunting tasks and use this to move forward into more giving tasks and all that stuff, that's the positive thing about AI. But this needs to be something that these machines should be able of doing. They should not be substituting, they should be supporting. And I think this needs a deep understanding of all those different developments that we have. You see that all these applications that you see, they're all going very deep. They're not broad. So there will be a lot of different apps that we need to use. So we need to have a general understanding and need to test it first. And then we can say, okay, this is a good idea, this is a bad idea. And that needs a lot of experts that are helping us to move this forward. And saying just no, like libraries forbid Google search some years ago, 20 years ago, it doesn't make sense. So you need to work on that. And I think we need to be, especially politicians, need to be much more on the qui-vive, as we had it in another talk, and much more informed about that whole stuff. That might be the critical part, that they're by profession, not that much.
Then there's another question from Urs asking or saying that ChatGPT as psychologist sounds scary, as it's based on its model is based on data encoded to what is supposed to be right, yet it includes a lot of biases and it's not asking questions from its side to better understand. How would you rate this?
I think there is there's a paper, or they made a test on the psychological use case, and I mean the implication on humans also, especially for these edge cases, using them for like mental health and coaching and so on. I think we're at the beginning. I don't know in which direction it goes, but the paper says, I mean, you're right. I mean, there are biases in there, and it might draw people into a direction which they don't want to go. So I also feel it's scary. I wouldn't use it for that, but I found it interesting what people come up with, right? If they have a long day.
Yeah.
I just wanted to show the possibilities, what's
Yeah.
out there. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. So I would probably say go to a real person and talk to, but it's what people are doing. Mainly in the US, we have to say, yeah.
Then you also asked the question with the bank, the big tech bank that you described. Does the client know that the voice data is captured and analyzed? I think you
Yes.
said yes.
Yes. Either it's technically it's organized that you ask for consent in the call. So you say this call is recorded, or like in Zoom, you have a pop-up coming up. Or for some banks, I just know the banks, I'm sorry, I don't know in other industries, but it's in the general terms and conditions. For example, for UBS, it's in they say in their general terms and conditions that everything will be recorded, all client conversations. It's very broad, right? They don't say it's recorded in a Teams call or it's recorded when we meet, but it's recorded.
Then Christian is asking, how do you assess the risk building a product around GPT or integrating GPT for key functionalities, as its non-proprietary data security lock-in effect?
I think the risk is high, to make a short answer. And what I think in the future, we are seeing that companies are building their own large language models. So we expect that some of the large language model will be open source. I mean, usually OpenAI releases the code. I think the 3 version is now open. Now it's the 3.5 and 4 version is now not open. But I think companies will start to build their own large language model and host them also in their own IT infrastructure in terms of data protection, data security.
Then you mentioned mainly the financial sector. Are you aware of any use cases with utility companies?
I'm not an expert in utility, and maybe we need a follow-up session on that. But also in sales or in the service industry and hotline, I mean, all these documentation use cases around the client, I would see that as well for all industries who have interaction with clients.
Good. Then I'm looking in our virtual audience. Are there any more questions for our 2 experts? I think we covered most of them.
Yeah.
So maybe we in the backup, maybe because we were talking a lot about responsibilities and all that stuff. Yeah, no. Yeah, oops. Yeah, okay. We talked a lot about responsibilities, and what struck my mind so much in the last weeks is that what can you control and what you should be aware of. And I just used the model of Corvey for his growth mindset, just to remind that, give you this a little bit of a reminder where you need to be looking at when you talk about AI usage within your corporation. So there's the circle of your control, the circle of influence, the circle of things that you can control, and there's then the circle of the concerns that you might be having. With the actions that you take in AI, and I'm not taking this now from an ethical point of view, but just be clear that you influencing with AI already a lot of stuff around your workforce, a lot of stuff about the legal part, and of course the privacy issues that you have. So a lot of stuff that falls into your responsibility is right on your feet that you need to take care of. If you're not sure that your privacy data agreement, or you are smart enough to convince your customers to give you those data, then outside of the financial industry, of course, where you've got a youth consent issue contract, is that you need to be aware that you are influencing right now much more than you did before. And this, when you use ChatGPT, means that you need to be aware not only of the risks, but the opportunities, and make yourself a value proposition for that one. So the circle of your control should be the one that you really ask yourself, where can I do things that are really helping me to push forward, and not maybe going for the sky is the limit, but doing the stuff that is the obvious. And I like the idea that Sina showed. If I can reduce the non-FaceTime work of an employee by 50%, then I already have a huge amount of impact to my employees and can free them from all that hassle. And of course, for the customer, it gets more convenient. And these added values that you have on both sides, I think is something that we need to take into consideration. This circle of concern, from my point of view, broadens, because you need to be much more on your feet with understanding what kind of societal issues come up. And I think one thing about AI is that the ease of use that it has you need to mirror in your own responsibility what it might be, looking at a backlash, what kind of risks you have, not in a negative sense, but understanding that there's a huge amount of challenges that are coming up that are much more on your feet right now than you could think of. And I believe that this might be coming to discussions that help us to understand better how we can use the technology in the future. But be aware that the circle of concern is really relevant in the whole topic. It's not only something that you need to control or that is in your influence. You need to have a much broader perspective on this one.
And maybe to add here, because for some people it's fairly new now, this whole AI topic and ChatGPT, but most corporations, they already work with like language services like DeepL.
Yeah.
And people paste like whole emails in there, right? There's also personal data in there. Probably most of you have never read the data processing agreement there and what happens with the data.
Yeah.
Also with Google, right? If you ask many questions with Google, I don't know, health related issues,
Yeah.
I have these and these symptoms, and then I have this symptom and this symptom. I mean, this also means you give away private data, and it's not something new. I think we have to advance in how we learn about it. And as Marcus rightfully said, like the concern circle probably gets bigger, but we already know a lot about it. I think it's a lot is also common sense. The problem with ChatGPT is just sometimes it's so convincing. It's very hard to detect where it goes wrong, right? And where there is a bias. I mean, and I'm not even worried about the biases that we know. I'm very worried about biases that we don't know yet.
Yeah.
They are built in the model, and we don't know about it, and we start living with it now, but we don't know what it means for us as a society. So I think this is what worries me more. So, you know, when we talk about pasting personal data, I mean, this is something we see, we can mitigate, but there's also things we don't see today. So.
Yeah.
Great. So thank you very much. There were no more questions asked in the chat. Thank you very much, Sina and Marcus, for being with us today. Thank you, dear alumni, for joining our session. Hopefully you liked it. I would like to encourage you to visit our website where you'll find more Web3 events that are taking place, one tomorrow and then a couple more in the next few weeks. So hopefully seeing you there physically or virtually. Wishing you all the best. Take care and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.